antibiotics are a big no-no because it has been, in fact, in lot of large population-based epidemiological studies of inflammatory bowel disease, and that reward system is also gone.
Sugar, most parents don't, especially even grandparents are not very aware. Actually, sugar acts in the same way a drug acts.
Yes, absolutely. Right? You become happy and then you want more of it. Human babies are per se helpless, and we are enhancing that helplessness by providing everything.
Actually, when I was studying my MBBS, I thought it doesn't even exist in India.
So long back, they had done a study in US and Europe where they looked at susceptibility to inflammatory bowel disease. Then your body doesn't know what is right, what is wrong. So it starts reacting to everything.
Welcome to Feminine Systems, the podcast where we not only heal and empower women, but also reimagine systems around her. I'm Dr. D, an integrative gynecologist, an author, and an entrepreneur. Today's topic is a very interesting topic, raised by bacteria. What Indian parents miss about gut development. For this topic, we are going to have a very extraordinary speaker who is a pediatric gastroenterologist. Dr. Athra Ravindranath did her MD Pediatrics from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. She did her Pediatric Gastroenterology DM in SGPGI Lucknow, and she is got awarded as a top 50 pediatric gastroenterologist in the world, and she's won a Young Investigator Award in Pediatric Gastroenterology at Barcelona, Spain and Finland. She works at Apollo BGS Hospital, Mysuru, and she has been a topper right from her MBBS, one of a genius and a very, very, very dedicated mother. So who else will be a better person to talk about this particular topic? So today in our podcast, we welcome Dr. Athra Ravindranath. So Dr. Athra, the most commonest complaint any mother would come to you is, my child is not eating adequately or well, or is a picky eater. She's a picky eater. So how do you deal with this? And what are the causes?
This is a very common complaint that I see in my OPD. If the child's weight and height is okay, the child is growing as per his growth chart and otherwise going to school, then we should see whether there's a problem with the type of food he's preferring. So if there is a faltering in his growth, we need to check whether there's something else going on. But if not, we need to find out what is the child eating. Is it all junk food? If he's preferring to eat biscuits and chips in preference to the routine food as a part of breakfast and lunch, and there is a problem with the food choice rather than the child not eating well itself.
Correct.
And if what is placed on the plate is not completed, then obviously the parent feels that the child is not eating well. But for all you know, he must have had a chocolate just before eating the breakfast. The moment you open a fridge, there are chocolates. Child may be just popping in chocolates, and these are just empty calories. So a lot of high calorie food goes into the child's tummy. So that brings us to the important concept of what is healthy food. So we say that junk food is bad, junk food is good. But what exactly constitutes junk food is, we think it is only pizza and burger and etc., all these typical westernized foods. But now IAP has come up with the IAP stands for Indian Academy of Pediatrics. They've come up with this new acronym called JUNC. This NC
Junks.
Junks.
Junks,
Yeah, it is still junks.
Okay.
And J
stands for
junk food.
Okay, all the junk food.
And U stands for ultra processed food. So what do you mean by ultra processed food? Typical example, all these powders that you add to milk to enhance the taste.
Okay. Any of those malts, right?
Yes,
what the famous malts.
Yeah, all these things are ultra processed.
Yeah, we think they are so healthy, and they are added with fortified with all the vitamins,
lot of sugar. Okay, and then they have a lot of emulsifiers.
They come in many flavors as well. So
and ads, the child gives into the ads. So all these things. So this is ultra processed food. JUN. N is nutritionally inappropriate food. So anything which is deep fried, say for a typical example, French fries. What does it have? It just has carbs and fat.
Correct.
And nothing else. The child keeps gobbling it. So that is nutritionally inappropriate food. And then C stands for carbonated beverages. So
Any
know that
carbonated, caffeinated beverages,
caffeinated beverages, all these things are also bad.
Right.
And most important is the S. S is the sugar sweetened beverages. People think that juices are very healthy.
Very true.
Yes.
They just assume, okay, it's only pure fruit juice, doctor.
Yes.
So they're like, I'm dumping him with, 6-7 oranges and making a very good orange concentrate.
Yes.
It is
but
again.
you're again adding sugar to it.
Yeah,
You're adding sugar to it, and you're breaking down all the fiber which is there in the orange. You are straining it. So you're actually getting rid of all the goodness in the fruit and giving them the nectar, the
so that
nectar.
also becomes part of the junk.
Part of the junks.
Very.
So we should be very clear as to what you should avoid. We had conducted a survey in our hospital.
Okay.
We gave questionnaires to all the parents who were coming and meeting me with 4-5 questions. So when we asked them, okay, do you think burger is healthy? Almost 95% said no.
Okay.
They know it is not healthy. Then do you think fruit juices are good for your child? 85% people said yes. And do you think a home cooked...
I want to stop you here because, in my household, when I grew up as a child, there used to be baskets of the sweet Musambi, sweet lamb, because whenever a granddad comes to see the grandchildren, they come with so much. So please put juice and give for my grandchildren. So it was like we used to have glasses of it was like water for us. So that itself was they feel we are doing the best for a child and. Actually, they are doing more harm, right?
Yes,
so it's purely because of unawareness. Ignorance.
People don't know. They want to do the best for their child,
Absolutely.
but they're not able to. And nowadays, we have all these packed beverages, packed fruit juices, which
if you're traveling in the train or flight, yes, you're just getting these carbonated or even these, very sweet fruit juices. And these are the things what
the child is happy to drink. And it's convenient, but is it of any good to your child? That's a question we need to ask.
I should see now, I'll tell you, my son, there is this fad of they behind the sport beverages now, because of the favorite sports star drinks that, and especially if they follow football, then it is even worse. They want all those very expensive, these drinks which has caffeine.
Yeah.
People think, absolutely. So they get that high, right? Children exposed to caffeine.
And they get addicted. Without your realization.
Sugar is addictive.
Yeah, and then if you see special children like autistic children, one thing which we tell them is to avoid sugar because they become very hyperactive.
Absolutely.
Something similar happens even in a normal child but to a lesser extent. So we are actually putting their health at stake by giving them high sugary drinks.
No, the problem is people assume I am only giving jaggery for my child. I'm giving coconut sugar for my child, palm sugar for my child, honey. I'm just adding, I'm so health conscious. I'm only adding honey to my child's food, and this is what most people think.
Yes. So let us ask, what does that sugar have? It has nothing but fructose. And that fructose has been linked to so many metabolic diseases. Fatty liver has been linked to high fructose intake. Cardiac diseases have been linked to high fructose intake. So irrespective of the source of sugar, it's ultimately fructose. So you have to restrict it.
Absolutely. In fruits, majority contain fructose more than glucose itself, right?
Yes.
And it's better to take it as a fruit than a fruit juice.
Why? Because fruit has fiber.
Yeah.
And fiber is actually good for us.
Right.
And fiber will help in our gut motility. Fiber will prevent constipation. Fiber will give us good microbes. So a lot of the goodness of the fruit is actually being eliminated when you just make it into a concentrate of just fructose.
I want to make a point here because, sugar, most parents don't, especially even grandparents are not very aware. And they feed them a lot of sweet. Actually, sugar acts in the same way a drug acts. The same dopamine pathway, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
It becomes a vicious cycle. It gives you the high, you become happy, and then you want more of it, and then it goes on and on.
And you crave for it, and all that.
And that's the other aspect that I want to introduce here is the Happy Meal concept. So why do our children prefer eating at a fast food restaurant? It's not that they were born with this tendency to eat. We as parents have introduced it. So, but then why are they not getting attracted to traditional meals? So let's imagine this scenario. You go on shopping with your children. You have a nice experience. They are very happy. You watch a movie. In the movie theater, what are you eating? You're munching popcorn.
Yeah. No, who's eating popcorn? Popcorn with seasoning.
Yes.
Butter and seasoning.
Yes.
Right? Supposedly, popcorn was supposed to be a decently healthier snack, but now you add
butter
and
salt.
the seasoning. It has sugar.
Yes.
Yeah, it is ultra processed.
Caramel
It is
popcorn,
ultra processed.
ultra-processed food. So you have a popcorn, then you come out, then you want to have dinner. The mall has all these fast food restaurant chains. You go to one of these places, you order burger, you order chicken, whatever.
Right.
And you're happy and you're getting back home. Now, what have you done to this child's mind? So, a happy day. When you're happy, a lot of happy hormones get released in your body. So, everything which
Okay.
happens that day
Okay.
is associated with that happiness and joy.
Okay.
So, you're happy about the movie, fine. And then you're going and eating in this particular restaurant, which is serving you unhealthy food, but it's making you happy. And any case, ultra processed food has better, tactile taste.
The reason is
sensations.
because they're high on sodium and sugar, right? High on salt and sugar.
Yes,
Both
so it's very
are
palatable.
Actually,
and it's tasty. Let's all agree to it. It is tasty. But in addition, you are introducing that food into a very happy environment. What happens next? You're sitting at home. You're getting bored, and you order the same food on Swiggy.
okay.
Right?
Okay.
What happens? The same happiness gets back to the child's mind. So you associate happiness with that food.
So there is a nostalgia here.
Yes, there's a
Okay.
nostalgia. So the happiness which the child felt on that day, the
Okay.
psychology of the child is getting reflected in the food when he's having. And now it becomes a cycle. So you feel happy, all your dopamine pathways, serotonin pathways.
Oh no, this is
are-
very new and interesting for me because here afterwards, when I'm going on a trip or taking my kids out, I think I should take them to all healthy food joints and
Yes.
options, right?
And that
because
should be a conscious
and that is
decision.
when we actually do the opposite. We try to at home we are really going little healthier alternatives, but okay, this is a vacation. Let us break little loose
Yes.
and relax the rules kind of thing, and let them do whatever they want to eat. I think that's a wrong thing to do.
It's a wrong thing to do.
Okay.
We as parents should choose the right type of places where we are eating, especially on happy days.
Okay.
You
this is
would have seen
something new.
it's just like a vicious cycle. Like, you would have seen certain chocolates and certain sweets which come with toys, right?
Correct.
Why do they want it again? Because they want the toy.
Absolutely.
It's something similar.
The chocolate is very little also, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That is a
Yeah,
very
and
good.
they want the toy, so they want the chocolate. Similarly, they want that happiness, so they want the food.
They're playing with the minds.
Yes.
Right? Your happiness pathways.
So
and
let's
how...
make our happy meals healthy meals,
Got it.
and that should start with the family.
Okay. Great. So this is a very, very new thing, and I think this a very valuable lesson. And I wanted to ask you because when I was exposed to pediatrics, there was only a pediatrician. At the worst, we had somebody called a neonatologist. Then now there is pediatric gastroenterologist. The specialties become so subdivided, right? And today, I will tell you, child's gut health is is so important that there are so many childhood diseases of the West we're seeing in India. What do you think about it?
Absolutely.
Oh, what is the changing scenario?
Yeah. So long back, when my professor started pediatric gastroenterology practice, when he used to talk about certain diseases which have an autoimmune origin, like your own immunity is acting against your own body. That's called autoimmune. So when we used to talk about autoimmune diseases, it used to be brushed off as, oh, these are Western diseases. We don't see in India.
Yeah, very true.
We were grappling with infections. We were grappling with tuberculosis. Okay, so our priorities were something else. But at least infections can be treated with antibiotics if it is diagnosed properly. What have we done to our children? We are now facing a lot of these autoimmune diseases, allergic diseases, very, very common. Like what? There's something called cow's milk protein allergy.
Okay.
This was a very Western disease because our babies were almost always exclusively breastfed. The mother was having healthy diet. So they never developed any allergy. So when you talk about allergy itself, we say there is a hygiene hypothesis. So when you're not exposed to certain routine infections, routine microbiota, then your body doesn't know what is right, what is wrong. So it starts reacting to everything. So similar, so that's why we have a lot of asthma, a lot of dust allergies. So similarly, something like that happens in the gut as well. So cow's milk protein allergy was almost unheard of in India. Now every alternate child, infant comes to me with symptoms suggestive of cow's milk protein allergy, where the child has diarrhea, blood in stools, colic, all these are symptoms of CMPA. Why does it happen? Number one, we've forgotten to breastfeed exclusively. We are introducing formula feeds very early. And number two, our baby's gut is not yet populated with good bacteria. And why does that happen? Because we are seeing more of cesarean section deliveries. We are seeing more of early introduction of formula milk. We are seeing more of introduction of processed food after the 6th month.
Right.
So all these things are making the child's gut susceptible to all these allergic autoimmune disorders. And the other set of diseases which are like really bad to have are called inflammatory bowel disease.
You're right. Actually, when I was studying my MBBS, I thought it doesn't even exist in India. I thought that. But now I'm seeing in any gastroenterology clinic, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are diagnosed left and right.
Yes.
Right?
And why does it happen? It's because
I feel we're overdiagnosing it.
Your immunity is actually acting against your gut, and they come with bloody stools, they come with severe pain, they come with short stature, poor growth, and all sorts of symptoms. And these are really bad diseases to have, because we'll have to give them medicines to suppress the hyperactive immune system.
Okay.
These medicines have their own side effects, and they have to be taken lifelong. Now, why did this scenario change? Like, why are our children getting these diseases which were not there before? So long back, they had done a study in US and Europe where they looked at susceptibility to inflammatory bowel diseases, and they found that we Asians have genes which make us susceptible to inflammatory bowel disease. So we have the susceptibility genes.
Okay.
But we didn't have the disease in our subcontinent.
Okay.
So we have the genes, but we don't have the disease.
Okay.
The same Indian population, when they go to Western countries, the disease is getting uncovered. I mean, it's getting unraveled.
Yeah.
What is that one thing which changed? Diet. Diet and environment. We are forgetting our traditional modes of eating, traditional modes of cooking, and then we are just blindly mimicking the West. So we are also getting the diseases, and because we have the genes, we are getting more severe varieties.
No, I know. We want to actually, the novelty seeking habit, right? Like we want to try something new every time. So they are recreating so many new dishes, and everything becomes so ultra processed. It is like if you don't eat pasta regularly, you are not considered to be eating contemporary.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If you eat a simple porridge from a millet, you are considered like, you're not classy, civilized.
Yes,
right?
I can say that for myself. When my mom used to give
probably
me
overnight oats or muesli is more cool breakfast. And I always saw that this flakes were one of the highest high glycemic foods, like high on sugar. They're actually when we categorize low, medium, and high glycemic index, basically, which actually triggers. So flakes fall into it, muesli falls into it. But we assume that is a cool thing, smart thing to do.
Yeah.
We have to be, this is what normal people eat. Today's world, else we are left behind.
Exactly.
That feeling is
that was there even for me. When my mom used to give me idlis and my friends used to have patties, I'll be like, oh no, I'm eating idli. But idli is so healthy, it is fermented.
Yeah.
It has no unnecessary fat. So we are forgetting our roots.
Right.
And that is where we need to start making the change.
Absolutely. Especially from children, it is more a habit forming things.
Yes.
And if they get habituated to completely eating the whole processed things right from the beginning, it is very difficult for them to change as an adult,
exactly.
right?
So, it's very difficult to break that.
Absolutely.
And then it will go on from generation to generation.
We will be a totally, unhealthier generation, every generation after the other. Yeah. You spoke about antibiotics, Dr. Atra. Can early antibiotics actually alter a child's gut health?
Definitely, because when you think about the human body, we are more bacteria than human.
Come again?
We should actually think of ourselves as parasites on a bunch of bacteria, because the number of the bacterial cells in our human body outnumber the cells
Correct.
that we have on our own.
Correct.
So we have
Absolutely.
so many good bacteria in our gut, and we are getting it from our mother when we are being born, then we are getting it from breast milk, and then constantly it is being modified by introduction to different antigens.
Okay.
Antigen is whatever the substances which go into our gut and which will stimulate our immune system, which will stimulate the microbial system. Now, what happens to the gut health? So basically, the microbes are teaching our immune system to develop and evolve. So it's like a training module which is happening.
Right.
So imagine the child is born with a healthy microbiome, and child has a viral infection, comes to you with just fever. And viral infection, fevers can be very high grade. It can actually
And children,
perturb
it
the
is
mother.
like, and adults usually get like 100 to 102 degrees mostly.
Yeah.
Sometimes children have temperature of 103, 104,
Yes.
and it is common
It's
also,
very
right?
common. It will perturb the family. The child will be really hot.
And
to touch.
even I know parents panic for 102 fever. I don't even care. I just give a paracetamol and just didn't bother.
And what do? They'll immediately give antibiotics.
Ah.
Okay, you give antibiotics to a viral infection. There's a saying, it gets cured in 7 days. If you don't give, it gets cured in 1 week. Because
Yeah.
you don't need the antibiotic in the first place. Because it's a viral infection.
No, still see, if we are happy it gets cured in 1 week because it's only 1 and that is 7. The mind is tricked.
Yes.
It's like, you understand. Okay.
7 days.
One is that, and the other part is like, I have given medicine.
Yes.
I'm sorted. Problem is the disease takes its own time to resolve, right?
Yes.
But I am sorted. Problem is me. I'm the mother. I'm so, or the father. Like, you need to treat them immediately.
Correct. And then they jump and give the antibiotics. And in our country, antibiotics are available over the counter.
And pediatricians are pressurized to prescribe.
prescribe
And,
antibiotics.
if they don't prescribe, what happens? They don't become a good pediatrician.
Yeah, and the parent will come to you every day. One day the fever is not subsiding, next day they'll come, the next day they'll... So if the child...
And they change the pediatrician, and by the time it will be 5th or 6th day, and already the cold is getting over.
And it's okay to get these viral infections. You must have heard that during the COVID waves, children were least affected,
Right.
compared to the adults.
Right.
Why was that so? Because the child's immune system is evolving, and it was just recently introduced to different viruses. Because obviously, children have more viral infections than adults.
Absolutely.
So this is also one of the viruses. So
And there are so many viral strains very specific for which are pathogenic to the children, right?
Yes. So children are always getting viral infections. COVID just came and went like another viral
Yeah.
infection.
Yeah.
So it's good to get these viral infections, and it's normal to
kids.
have 5 to 6 viral infections in a year in any child.
Oh, this
you don't
is
have to give
really
antibiotics. For that.
exactly. This is going to really panic. 5 or 6 times my child is falling sick means they just really can't handle it. If they fall sick, they're okay. It's child, yeah.
So I would just say that trust your pediatrician. Let him or her judge.
No, it is a cultural conditioning, doctor. Because it is more like parenting is overrated, and it is like we're making it so to fill a guilt, like we have to do something every time. We don't have to do something, right? That is the problem.
Yeah.
So
So antibiotics are a big no-no, because it has been, in fact, in lot of large population-based epidemiological studies of inflammatory bowel disease, when they go back to the previous antibiotic histories, many of these children have received antibiotics in the first 2 years of life.
Oh.
Those who developed IBD
Okay.
vis-a-vis
Okay.
the group which did not develop
some
IBD.
retrospective studies or have say
This data has come from the West, because obviously in our country we don't know who's getting antibiotic, who's not.
We don't
But
have.
in the West, every antibiotic which is prescribed is
no,
being
Indian population,
calculated.
every child is exposed to antibiotics, right, left, and straight.
Yeah.
So
I have a 10-year-old child. You know how many times I've given antibiotics to her in the last 10 years?
okay, maybe now, because you're a pediatrician and pediatric gastroenterologist, maybe 6-7 times,
Just thrice. That's it. And that too I waited to see if it's just a viral infection.
so that is only normal requirement, right?
Yes.
So
you wait. Let your child... It's okay. Fever is not going to kill anybody.
absolutely. So I think we have to be treated. The parents' minds have to be treated. So, what is your view on? There is this concept of baby-led weaning. versus traditional, spoon feeding and, feeding the baby to eat. Like weaning is something after 6 months when you introduce solids, right? So what are the views? Because there is something called this baby-led weaning where the child is given the food on the plate and it is allowed to choose and, spill and consume how much ever.
Yeah.
So versus the feeding by spoon, katori methods, what is your view?
So if you look at all offsprings, compared to animals, human babies are the most helpless babies.
Absolutely.
So
We take almost 18 years, 20 years to develop. Even 40, I think. If you ask my father and mother, they would say, oh, she's not grown, 40 and not grown. She's like,
so human babies are per se helpless.
Yeah.
And we are enhancing that helplessness by providing everything. So
this is the most philosophical point. Can you repeat it once more?
human babies are born helpless.
Yeah.
But we are enhancing that helplessness by providing everything. It's not just with food, with respect to a lot of things.
Right. Especially we are overfed of everything. The more is more today,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
We are giving,
True.
you're getting more, and
Yeah.
still we feel empty.
Exactly. And that reward system is also gone.
Right.
You're getting everything. So you don't have to work hard to get anything.
Right. So, how do you relate this to this baby-led weaning?
Yeah. So, of course, the baby is being breastfed for the first 6 months, and then comes the introduction of complementary feeds. So, during this time, the child should again start enjoying eating. So, the digestion starts the moment you start seeing and smelling food. So, when you see food and when you smell food, our stomach starts secreting the acids to start the digestive process. So, there is preparedness happening. And then when you touch food, when you smell it, all these things will lead to digestion. So when the child is exploring himself, herself, different types of food, different textures, and trying to put it in the mouth, and not just tasting but also feeling the textures, it enhances the digestive capacity and the baby enjoys the process of eating.
Okay,
So
interesting.
the child may not eat adequately and completely if you just provide a variety of food on his plate, but use that opportunity to understand what he's preferring and let him do it. And while the child is playing and exploring the food, you feed the child. So the child is going to associate that satiety with different types of food, and the child will start having interest in eating.
Great. So you feel a combination of both is a very beneficial thing. And I also found a significant thing when the child eats, it obviously spills it down, eats with both hands. However clean it is, still it is, by the time half an hour the baby takes to eat, there are some microbes which it consumes, which are like, it adds to the microbiome of the baby. So, it knows to stop also, as you say, it knows to, it can communicate that I'm done, right? Like, yes, that is a very interesting.
So the Japanese, they say that you should stop eating when you start feeling full. You should not wait until your stomach gets bulged with a lot of food. It applies to even adults. So the moment you start feeling, I'm done, that's when you should stop.
No, we are into the dumping syndrome mode always. Then kind of I shouldn't have eaten so much.
And our stomach is a very forgiving organ because it keeps expanding to accommodate whatever we eat. So that first,
I want to understand what is the requirement of the breast milk of an infant, from birth till at least that first 2 years. How does it change?
So in the first 4 to 6 months, definitely almost every 2 to 3 hours, the child will need to be fed because we're not giving the child.
How much ml of milk requirement?
It depends on the age of the baby. So the secretion is also proportionate to that.
Right.
So our body is made in such a way that it secretes adequate amount of milk. We should just make sure that the child is given the fore milk and the hind milk, because the hind milk is rich in the fat, immunoglobulins, and that gives the satiety. So on an average, if you express breast milk, you will get at least 90 to 100 ml.
Every time you express.
Yeah.
But the initial first 15 days,
it will not be that much. So it depends upon
the requirement is also very less.
And especially colostrum will be hardly anything, but you still feed the baby. And then as the baby grows, the requirement increases, the breast milk output also increases. After 6 months, it starts reducing. but you still don't stop breastfeeding.
Okay.
You still continue till the child is about 1.5, 2 years, and then you stop it.
Okay.
So after the child is about 1.5
any
years.
particular the this much ml of milk is the capacity a baby needs in 24 hours in the first, especially because the problem is
again,
most mothers say milk is not enough. This is again a big complaint, right?
Yeah,
like when you're feeding a baby in the first 6 months. So I just want to know, like, first
What should they drink? How much should they drink?
Yeah, I see like it is only 30-40 ml is the capacity of the
Again, it depends on the weight of the child. There's no one size fits all thing.
True. And I'm saying a normal 3 kg born baby.
Yeah, so initially the child can only consume 30 to 45 ml. That's the max.
Right.
And then gradually it will keep increasing. And
they think the child has to have drink 1 liter in the first few months.
And other parameters, the breast should feel light after the feed. The baby should sleep for 2 hours after the feed, gain weight. So the initial 1 week to 10 days, there will be a dip in the weight, and then the baby will start gaining. So the child should start gaining weight as per the birth weight. Like, that will be our baseline, and from there the weight gain should happen. If all that is happening, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because you're probably not realizing how much the child is feeding.
Right. So I want to ask you, what are the causes of the stomach aches in children?
So let's talk first about
Sometimes they dismiss it also.
Yeah. So let's first talk about infants.
Yeah.
And then talk about older children, because
Okay.
they are related but slightly different. So infants, especially around 3 to 4 months, come with incessant crying, and we more towards the evening. We call it the evening colic or the infantile colic.
Okay.
And the child will be incessantly crying. Whatever you do, you swaddle the baby, you try to feed the baby, the child is just not happy and keeps
Some
crying.
tantrums. So
Affects the whole family.
Yeah, people
it lasts for
and the
weeks
husband-wife fight, or what, you're not taking care of the child is hungry, you go feed. Kind of, it all happens. No? The household's very
They're frustrated because they don't know what to do.
Because the child is crying.
And if you observe closely, the crying stops after the child lets out a big burp or a big fart.
Okay.
Because the whole concept is that air building up in your intestine, and that is causing discomfort.
And the children swallow more air.
Yes, they swallow air, and air is also, gas is generated by our own microbial system.
Absolutely.
As a part of the metabolism.
And that's normal. Most people think it is a disease.
It is normal.
Yeah.
It is normal, and you leave it there, the child will outgrow it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry. And in very extreme cases, we will give some probiotic supplements. That's all you need to do. You don't need to do anything else in case of infantile colic. Now, coming to older children who come with recurrent abdominal pain. So first we ask, is the pain affecting the child? Is the pain waking up the child from sleep? Is it affecting the child's growth? Is it in the center of the abdomen? Is it elsewhere? So these are the questions which we generally ask to decide whether this pain is problematic or not.
Right.
When it is problematic, we call it organic. We have to test for some cause which is causing the pain. But in most of the cases, it is a non-problematic pain, and we call it as a functional abdominal pain. So these pains are very non-specific. It will be around your navel. It will just be in the center of the abdomen. The child will just non-specifically keep the hand on the tummy and say it's aching. And many a time, as the child gets distracted, they just forget about the pain. It's not severe enough to affect the daily activities. It doesn't wake up the child from sleep. So then we call it as a functional abdominal pain. Now, what is causing it? There are multiple theories. So starting from the abnormal microbes in your intestine, we call it as dysbiosis. That means the type of bacteria changes in your gut, making you predisposed to higher pain sensitivities.
Okay.
So naturally itself, our intestines will keep contracting like this.
Right. And growing also in children, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, so
normal, that contraction is how food is being passed
yes,
through the
as a part of digestion. Even in between digestion, we have some motor complexes which will keep happening. We never even realize it. But these children will even perceive that as pain. And second thing, the type of food they eat. Third, the neuromodulation. There's something called gut-brain axis. So,
and they say gut is the second brain also, right?
yes. So we've all heard about central nervous system, CNS. There's something called ENS, enteric nervous system, which is as extensive as the central nervous system itself. The gut has its own brain.
Right.
And that brain transmits to our real brain the information.
So all the neurotransmitters, what is secreted in the brain is secreted
In
there,
the gut
right?
as well. Yeah. So when you get very tensed and when you're very anxious, have you felt your heart beating fast?
Of course.
Yeah. Something like that affects your gut as well. It can affect the motility. I've seen children who keep passing stools just before the exam.
Yeah.
They're very tensed. So your intestines are contracting faster. How
Correct.
does it happen? What has it got to do with the gut? It's just the chemicals, the neuromodulation, the hormones. So stress.
So this pain, this colic pain is nothing to worry.
Can ignore it, but you should also see if there is a triggering cause to it. Any stress can cause pain. So there could be issues in school, there could be issues at home.
So the
with
child
friends.
which complains too much of belly pain, you don't have to jump into deworming, but it could be an emotional pain as well,
Yes.
right?
It's in the brain.
Yeah,
It's in your
sometimes.
head.
And the change, as you said, the dysbiosis, like there is a change in the microbiome. Can you talk a little more about what is this? Today, they say everybody knows this probiotic hype and all, but why? Because it improves your gut microbiome is what people say, without knowing what it is. And can you just throw some light on what is the gut microbiome per se? And you just tell me that. What is the gut microbiome per se?
So normally our colon is populated with a lot of good bacteria, good fungi and viruses. I can't say everything is good, but there is a balance that the good outweighs the bad. And they produce a lot of metabolic functions. Whatever food we are eating, ultimately when it goes into the colon, it acts as the food for the bacteria. That's called a prebiotic. And the bacteria will use it, act on it, and then produce a lot of chemicals. And those chemicals, there are good chemicals and bad chemicals depending upon the type of bacteria you harbor. And those chemicals will determine the diseases that you're going to develop.
Very interesting.
So they have linked.
And they are called actually postbiotics, right?
Yes,
so
they're called postbiotics. And almost all diseases nowadays are linked to the gut microbiome. It's not just direct diseases of the gut like inflammatory bowel disease that we talked about. They link fatty liver with dysbiosis. They link Parkinsonism with dysbiosis. They link autism, cardiac diseases. Everything goes back down into your gut.
absolutely, because all the autoimmune disorders, mental health,
yes, everything.
anxiety, depression.
And actually, we are only understanding the tip of the iceberg. We really don't know what these microbes do to us, but they definitely play a very important role. They are a metabolically active organ. We should call it as another organ system itself.
I call it as an ecosystem, Atra, because it is like it is self-sustenant, right? And it's alive.
Yes,
it's very alive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's so many more, almost 1,000. They say 500 to 1,000 species of bacteria and fungi is what we harbor.
Yes,
as normal commensals in the microbiome,
True.
right?
And then we have to, it's our responsibility to pass on the good microbiomes to all our future
You're
generations.
right. So this one thing is this prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotic. So probiotics and postbiotics are chemical, or probiotics are the bacteria
itself,
right? Postbiotics are the chemicals
produced as a result of
prebiotics are food what you feed this bacteria, right?
Yes.
So this is, now there are foods, any number of foods, everything. Probiotic added idli batter, kulfi, chocolates. No, they were only initially yogurts which were doing it. Apart from regular capsules or probiotic supplements. Now you have some drip beverages. It's a huge probiotic is a big market today.
Yeah.
So
but do we even understand what bacteria are there, what strains are there, and do they actually have it? Are they alive? Or are they killed bacteria? And what if they're alive? What is a guarantee that when you're eating it, it is going and populating your gut and then reproducing and producing the good effects?
Yeah, the carrier is important because your stomach is acidic and it can kill it if there itself.
Yes, absolutely.
And is that strain what is actually needed? What is the strain? Nobody mentions.
Yes, and what amount? How many units? Nothing is mentioned. So it's a fad.
Right.
Yeah, but what we can do is to increase the good bacteria is to consume natural probiotics like curd, like buttermilk, like fermented food, like idli and dosa. You don't have to add a probiotic to idli.
The simple kanji, which is like overnight, soaked.
Yes.
We
call it parayasora.
Yeah, rice, or it could be a millet also.
It can
you
be
just
anything. You just leave
ferment
it, let it
overnight.
ferment.
Next
That's good
day you
enough.
have it with buttermilk. Nothing better than that.
Yeah.
But this is not as cool as an overnight oats or a muesli. Yeah.
So we should always look.
I'm old.
back.
I will look very old school and not smart, and kind of this. At least weekly once somebody can take this, right? At least once in a while, you kind of, at least every week you have as a ritual
Yeah,
that
so-
you colonize your. It's like a gut cleansing
Yes,
ritual.
detox.
Detox and gut cleansing ritual
Oh, yeah.
where
So
you kind
there
of.
are- people are crazy about these detox drinks and detox blah blah blah. People should understand the best detoxification organ in your body is your liver. You just take care of your liver.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
they will again detox by having alcohol. No? So now that is also.
So alcohol on one hand, but we're also dealing with another epidemic, the fatty liver,
Fatty liver.
which
yeah.
is directly connected to food, microbiome.
Today, there are a lot of people who just send me their ultrasound report with a fatty liver on ultrasound diagnosis. Grade 1 fatty liver, grade 2 fatty liver. So, this is like even now children are having diagnosed of fatty liver.
Which is very
So-
concerning. Which is very
Right?
concerning.
So, what does it lead to?
Okay, so normally liver should have only liver cells and a few fat cells here and there. When the number of fat cells are increasing, they are going to affect the liver functioning. And if it's increasing to a certain extent, it can even cause something as bad as cirrhosis. But the problem is, it's a very silent epidemic. You never know. You won't have any symptoms. You won't have pain. You won't have jaundice. You will not have anything. Even your liver function test will be normal initially. And even for ultrasound to pick up fatty liver, at least 30% of the liver should be replaced by fat. So the pathogenesis, the starting point of the disease is many, many years back.
Okay.
It's ultrasound picking up is actually late stage.
Much later stage.
Yes. So
Is it reversible?
it is reversible to a certain extent. If it has not caused scarring and cirrhosis, it is reversible.
Grade
Especially
3?
grade 1, grade 2 are all reversible.
Grade
when it
3?
goes to grade 3, we need to assess if it has already started causing scarring of the liver. But it is definitely related to all these lifestyle diseases like diabetes, obesity, all these things happen.
Do you see children going into, because in the adults the liver transplant is numbers are increasing. Previously we thought it was alcoholic liver cirrhosis. Now this non-alcoholic or that MASH, which is metabolically induced,
Metabolic associated steatohepatitis,
steatohepatitis is causing liver failure and going for it's a cirrhotic kind of thing. But do you see any transplant requirement, liver transplant requirement in children because of
MASH?
yeah.
The answer would be no, because MASH takes many years
to
to
develop.
become cirrhotic. But yeah, we see fatty liver in children due to a lot of other inherited metabolic diseases also. So when a child comes to me with fatty liver, I'll have to evaluate for those inherited metabolic diseases. Now,
Okay.
if those are ruled out, and if the child is having other risk factors like obesity or diabetes, then I know that this is a MASH. And this is the time to intervene. So we are at a very good juncture when you are catching children early, adolescents early. So this is when you have to inculcate healthy eating habits, physical activity, weight loss strategies. And if you do that, it is completely reversible.
Usually these children are slightly overweight, isn't it?
Yeah, most of them.
Most of them, right?
Very
Because
less than 10% are lean MASH.
because I saw statistics recently, like they say 90%, 80 to 90% of children are malnourished. By malnourishment, we include undernutrition,
As well as
overnutrition,
overnutrition.
as well as micronutrient deficiency.
Yes, yes.
So 90% of our children in India are malnourished kind of. So this is something which is very alarming. Something we have so much advanced in technology and we are not eating right.
Yeah,
As
again it
something
boils
basic.
down to the food.
Right, that's what something either you do underdoing it, overdoing it, somewhere you're either
Yes.
deficient.
So
So,
eating
what do
healthy.
you kind of this is what again most children are falling into. So, what is your advice to parents to just because most people are doing full-time parenting, and they want to do a good job. So, I
Yeah.
just want to understand why
So
is this.
it's as a parent, it's your responsibility to introduce the right kind of food to your child. The child doesn't come from your womb asking for a burger or asking for fruit juices. You are the one.
It's
who's
like
introducing.
like my first question, like, why do you want to stock your house with all the junk? Always your freezers are stocked with
Yes.
French fries or sometimes ice creams and
Yes.
it's always
And
stocked.
a lot of these ultra processed food contain emulsifiers.
Oh, these Greek yogurts are such a hyped.
Yeah,
Overhyped.
emulsifiers are very bad for the tight junctions in your intestine. What are these tight junctions? We have cells which are arranged.
No, what are
on side.
emulsifiers?
Emulsifiers are chemicals which they add to mix water and oil. In general, water and oil don't mix. But
Right.
you see mayonnaise.
Right.
Yes.
No, that's why I wanted this.
They have emulsifier where water.
I grew up as a child without eating mayonnaise. Now my children can't, anything, any starter you give them, they want a mayo.
Yeah. So what do these emulsifiers do? They make our gut leaky. So the inner lining of the gut has lot of cells which are nicely arranged. So they let only the harmless substances to go across. They act as gatekeepers.
Barrier, no?
Yes,
That's a gut
yes,
barrier,
yeah.
basically.
So the moment you add these emulsifiers, they're known to cause the gut to be leaky. And all these unnecessary antigens will go into your body, stimulate your immune system, they will start acting against your gut, they'll start acting against other organs. So there comes the genesis of a lot of autoimmune diseases.
So can you suggest some healthy snack for our children? No, that's a
Very tough question. Healthy is easy, but whether they'll eat or not is a question.
healthy, tasty options. Because I give my child healthy option. That is what I think. But is it really healthy? I don't know. So I just
So
want...
the child is hungry in between two meals. So give them anything which has good amount of protein. You can give nuts, you can give sprouts, you can make it tasty by adding some flavor as per their requirement. You can give nuts, you can give sprouts, you can give tofu, paneer, all these things along with veggies. You should make your child's meal colorful. That color comes from the vegetables. And make vegetables also happy, healthy food. Most of the children don't like to eat vegetables. Why is that? Because maybe we make it in a very boring manner. So make it interesting and make it healthy and avoid giving them fried foods like chips.
I mean, we can try to avoid the packed foods as snacks, no?
Yes.
Something what we...
Everything cooked at home.
Home could be a very... And many assume dates is a very healthy snack. It's high on sugar, very low on iron.
It is.
Nobody understands that.
You can have it once in a while, but it's not like a reliable.
You can take it like a dessert and rather than health food.
And many of these dates,
Superfood.
Many of these dates that you get in the market have added date syrup to it to make it tastier.
And generally they say the iron content is so low, but it is marketed as though that is the iron-rich food. No, your beetroot is very high on iron,
Yeah,
basically.
spinach,
all types of... India had so many variety of these spinach types, green leafy vegetables, hundreds, right? Only the West knows spinach and kale, right? So we had a million different types,
Other varieties.
And this can be made into very nice snack, actually, very tasty snacks as well. And there is a hype for makhana.
Makhana, at least if I tell you, in the north of India, it's very easily available and it's very often given to children. It used to be a cheaper alternative for nuts.
Right. But now we're processing it and
we're
seasoning.
processing it, we're adding salt, we're adding pepper.
And the seasoning is add oil as well. So there is fat as being,
Also,
that's
yeah,
what. So it is not as healthy as it is
Not
being
as healthy,
marketed
yes,
very
yes,
much, right? So can you tell me, where is this future of diagnostics and what are emerging in this pediatric gut medicine? So because that's a very evolving specialty. So we would like to know, very inquisitive to know what is happening in that field.
That's an interesting question. So if you're talking only about the luminal tract, so we in pediatric GI, we divide it into liver, pancreas and lumen. Lumen is from your mouth till your anus. So interestingly, lumen is the area which we don't understand much.
True.
Compared to the liver, pancreas, etc. So because it is populated with so many microbes, we still don't know what's normal. It's still a bell curve because There may be different normals. So what we are evolving now is like previously we had only a stool culture. You take the stool and culture it, one organism will grow. But now we have a lot of genetic markers to see what type of bacteria you are harboring and to understand what you're deficient in. And there is an attempt to replenish that bacteria, but that's not where we are getting as of now, because we still don't know whether what we are replenishing is actually going and populating and all that. And from the same concept, the deviation is the fecal microbiota transplant, which is approved in certain diseases, where we actually collect healthy food and instill it in the gut of these diseased patients.
You collect like healthy stools.
Yes, healthy stools, and we
It's a fecal
it's the stool
transplantation.
which is being transplanted. So
shit gets transported now to the gut again
so
back.
your shit is very, very, very valuable.
Oh my god. So this is what, okay. So is it practiced in India?
It is practiced in certain institutes and also only for certain indications. You cannot generalize it.
Because assuming they're just to colonize the bacteria, the microbiome gut with the
we have to colonize the intestine with healthy bacteria so that they don't get the disease again. We may have to repeat the process, but it cannot be generalized as of now. But maybe a day will come when we will know what we are deficient in, and we will only give that particular strain of the bacteria, and will ensure that it will populate the gut. But we have not got there yet, but we are in the process. And a lot of these functional disorders, which we call it functional abdominal pain, functional dyspepsia, functional constipation, all these things are now going to be regarded as disorders of gut-brain interaction. They'll all be renamed in the future, in the coming guidelines, as DGBI, disorders of gut-brain interaction, and they'll be called as microorganic diseases. Because we may not detect them on routine scans, routine colonoscopies, etc. But it's all at the level of these microbes and at the cellular level.
And what does it do actually to us?
That's what. So if you have a certain variety of bacteria and it is producing certain postbiotics, which is increasing the motility, you will have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. If it reduces the motility, you will have the constipation predominant irritable bowel syndrome. So like that. So everything is driven by the microbe. So we are trying to target that.
Targeted,
personalized medicine. All these things will be.
So you do a stool. Initially, only culture for bacteria and all was done.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we have genetics,
especially for the worm infestation.
PCR based tests. All these things have evolved
to diagnose, targeting the microbiome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's all at a very experimental level now. But we'll get there someday.
Right. And this also affects, this postbiotics or the molecules that are being generated by these bacterial cells have a role in, the genetic modification that is happening at the cellular level.
Yeah.
Inflammatory issues, like let's say for any cancer, inflammation is a trigger, right? Like any diabetes, anything. Inflammatory markers are always increased in these conditions.
Because our immune system is going haywire.
Because and these postbiotics can act, play a role, right?
Yes. There is something called, naturally all cells are dividing in our body. Some aberrant cells are created in our body every day.
Right.
So if these aberrant cells are left like that, they'll grow into a cancer. But who is taking care of these aberrant cells? Our immune system.
Right.
They will go and eat away these aberrant cells so that we don't get those abnormally active proliferating cells. To be clear, for cancer.
Right.
How do these immune system know that I'm supposed to eat these cells? Because they are being groomed.
Right.
And microbes in our gut and the postbiotics that are generated play a role in grooming our immune system. And they actually teach the immune system what is right, what is wrong.
Right. So now, and actually what happens, the immune system is down-regulated. We call it as an immunocompromised state, so that, the
immune tolerance.
It develops to tolerance and then compromise, right? So then it ends up as it starts like inflammation, then goes into.
So it goes to even stress. Even your everyday stress will produce a lot of pro-inflammatory cytokines in our body.
Absolutely.
So a lot of things influence it, but the most important is food. Hippocrates, who's regarded as the father of medicine, centuries ago he said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." And let us just follow that.
People are not ready to listen to that. No, people are not accepting it. Most people, no, there was somebody when I said this statement, argued with me for a while. Right? They were like, no, how can food be the medicine? Medicine is medicine and food is food. I was like, no, it is not. You've undervalued food.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite first weaning food?
I would say raw banana.
Okay.
And it's something which is
the Kerala, they make it as a raw banana powder,
Yes,
and
yeah,
make it like a porridge kind of thing.
porridge, and that used to be given to almost all babies in Kerala, and I think in a lot of other states also. But there is a science behind this raw banana.
Okay.
When we eat carbohydrates, it contains starch.
Okay.
It's a complex carbohydrate. Once we eat it, our pancreas secretes an enzyme called amylase.
Okay.
It breaks down this starch,
Okay.
and then it gets absorbed.
Okay.
And then we get the energy. Now, this raw banana powder has a large quantity of amylase resistant starch.
Right.
So, the starch is not immediately broken down in the small intestine by the amylase. It goes as such into your large intestine, the colon. There, the bacteria will break down this amylase resistant starch. So, basically, you're providing food for the bacteria.
Yeah, it becomes a prebiotic.
Yes, it becomes a prebiotic. The good bacteria will proliferate, and as a part of that metabolism, it will produce what is called as short chain fatty acids. That will give us calories, and that gets absorbed very easily. And when a short chain fatty acid is absorbed, even a lot of water molecules are also absorbed. So you won't get diarrhea.
Right.
And the
Right.
same concept is used nowadays in treating loose stools, treating diarrhea. We give something called the green banana diet, which acts on the same principle. But we fail to understand all these science behind our traditional.
Yeah, this was
weaning
such a
food.
traditional weaning food, right? And we've just shifted to some fruit purees with added sugar. Do you really need salt and sugar in the first year of life
No, we don't need salt and sugar
for a child?
for a
Food.
child. That is
People
a big
say-
no. There's no discussion about it. You don't add it. That's it. Period.
Most people like, how can it be tasty? You're conditioning yourself.
Yes,
You don't
yeah.
have to condition at least up to 1 year.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So, okay. We're going to my favorite part of Feminine Systems podcast. It's the rapid fire kind. So, you can choose to answer yes, no, true, false, or, or a line answers which are like, probiotics should be taken every day. Myth or magic?
It's a myth.
Okay. The gut heals itself if left alone. True or false?
To a certain extent, yes.
Okay. You can reset your microbiome in 3 days.
Difficult,
Okay.
but you can reset it if you eat healthy over a long period of time.
Got it.
Not in 3 days.
Yeah. Vaginal birth is better for microbiome than a cesarean section. Fact or fear?
Fact, definitely, because vaginal birth will populate our intestine with the good microbiome.
The inoculation happens at when the child traverses the maternal canal, right?
Yes,
like the vaginal
yeah.
canal.
So that's when the sterile gut gets
Actually populated with
the microbes.
normal.
So whenever possible, yeah, you have
Yes,
to prefer
but-
vaginal.
but it is
yeah,
not-
there will be indications for cesarean section.
Yeah, and those who go through a cesarean section need not fear this too much, but
But
you
then
can,
at least the other thing that you can do is provide exclusive breastfeeding.
Absolutely, because and the skin contact, right? There are common cells. That's why you like when you do breastfeeding, the sucking itself, like it actually swallows. So breastfeeding itself, the skin to skin contact, close contact, and that feeding itself, the baby gets that inoculum. So
Yes,
from the mother,
yeah. So you don't have to worry
not too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it actually again the mother's milk it acts as a prebiotic again.
Yes.
So it helps it grow much faster and things like that. All fermented foods are probiotic. Yes or no?
Not really.
Yeah, most
if
people
They think even vinegar is a probiotic. They think, but on the other hand, if you can take curd, buttermilk, all these are popular because it's a lactobacillus which is producing the curd. So those
Right.
are, but not everything which is fermented. Is
right.
a
When there is a live culture, then it is probiotic. Not necessarily just a soaked vegetable in vinegar.
Yeah.
Pickled
not.
olives are all considered as it's probiotic. No. Best food for mood.
I would say something like curd and any fruits like mangoes, bananas.
Okay. Yeah, bananas because it can increase serotonin,
Yeah.
right? If your gut could talk to you now, what would it say to you?
Please give me healthy food and enjoy your food.
Okay.
Take time to eat.
Okay.
See your food, feel your food, smell your food, chew well. And if you see, people nowadays talk a lot about Mediterranean diet. But okay, there are some good things, and our traditional diet is also almost as good as the Mediterranean diet. But if you see the pyramid of the Mediterranean diet, the bottommost one says it is the friendliness and the joy of eating. If you see the bottom part of the pyramid, and then comes the food.
So it is not just what you eat; it's about how you eat, your relationship with food, right?
Again, happy meals.
Right. No, people actually dismiss such important things, which actually helps improve your digestion, improves absorption,
Yeah.
right? The same thing what is eaten by both of us, the absorption could vary.
True,
Right?
absolutely.
So
today, if you're walking into my house and I'm making dosas, even the aroma will stimulate digestion. You feel like eating.
Right.
Vis-a-vis.
The
I'm
thought,
giving you,
the thought of food itself actually stimulates a lot of
Yes.
enzymes from the
Yes,
saliva.
yes.
Yeah.
And compare it to, I'm giving you a already packed sandwich, which is, you're just eating. You're not smelling it. You're not feeling it. So
Eating
there's
with
a
your
big
hands
difference.
also actually is of a
True, tactile
significant
stimulation.
I know.
Yes.
So, one mistake you see people making with their food and digestion today
Too much of processed food and fast food.
is women's gut health under researched.
Yes, because a lot of these population-based studies, they try to include men and women, but because there are so many changes happening in a woman's body compared to a man, we should have exclusive women-centric researches, especially with respect to gut health, which is lacking.
We
there
really
are
don't
lacking
have
in that.
much deeper studies. Most of our medications were clinical trials were based. All the traditional ones are based on men, right?
Yes,
So
yeah,
they
and
were
even if they tried to include women in trials, you cannot put them in the same basket.
Right.
Maybe you should view them separately.
Right. Because the hormones and the follicular phase are different, and that there is research saying the hormones as well as the microbiome in a follicular phase, in an ovulatory phase, across the menstrual cycle in a woman is so different.
Yeah, and we don't know about it.
Yeah,
We are
so-
simply talking about
Right.
microbes in general.
What effect it has on it, like so
Yeah.
that it is so variable, right? The hormones are like there is a dip completely, there is such a peak it reaches, it's so cycle, it's not so in case of a man, right?
Yeah.
For the male
Correct.
pattern. So more research has to be done. Are frequent antibiotics okay in toddlers?
Not at all okay.
Yeah. So one lifestyle change that boosts a child's gut instantly,
Eat home cooked meals.
and please go out and play.
Yeah.
They have become very sedentary these days
True.
now.
Yeah.
So,
Go out into the fields, go with bare feet and play.
and this
Be a
over
part of
sanitization is
nature.
also
Yes.
a part.
Let's get away with the hygiene hypothesis. The child is not going to fall sick so fast. He's equipped with an immune system.
No, I know parents who send sanitizer with their child to school regularly. Can they go wash their hands and eat their food? That is enough.
that's
Good enough, right?
Because washing will take care of the visible dirt, and that's enough.
Visible dirt and
Enough.
that's enough, right?
That's enough.
Yeah, but they just want to kill all the good bacteria in your hands. Then the point of eating with your fingers is got lost.
Yes. Your child is not going to perform a surgery.
I know.
So let him just eat.
Absolutely. So, gut brain link in kids, real or theory?
Real. As I told you earlier, there is a lot of gut brain interaction happening, which is affected by your environment, your stress levels. It's affected by the food that you eat. And that is why we have so many functional disorders in children nowadays. So it is real, and we have to address the root cause when children come with these problems.
Daily probiotic supplement to a child, yes, no, or food is enough?
Food is enough in most of the cases.
So probiotic is basically needed only for indications, right?
Yes.
Not
the
like
supplemental
left, right.
probiotics are needed only in certain indications.
Uh-huh.
But when you eat, you try to eat food which is healthy, which will
And
help
it's a
you have-
natural probiotic.
Yes. Yeah, that's
probiotic is fine, like when you have it as a curd or when you have it.
correct. You don't have to pop a pill for it.
Exactly. It is like, let it be part of your healthy diet plan, basically.
True.
So, breast milk, formula milk, or both? What does the gut prefer?
First 6 months only breast milk. After that, complementary feeds with breast milk. And let's try to get away with the formula milk.
Very interesting. Jaggery versus sugar versus honey.
It's all the same. It all has fructose. All of them have it.
I heard of the heavy metals in the weaning foods of large MNCs also. Single cereal based, still the cereals, what is available. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, there has been a lot of discussion about this. Heavy metals include lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, which are harmful to our body. So we cannot be taking that in our food. So it also depends upon where you're growing your cereal for those infant feeding food. So if the soil is rich in heavy metals, it will be incorporated in the millet or in the cereal that you're taking, and then that gets concentrated in your food, and even during the process of making it can get contaminated. So this can put your child's gut health or even the other immune system, liver health, everything at stake. So
Okay.
let's just give them home cooked complementary
Yeah,
foods.
once in a while or emergency or a travel, but not
That's
like,
enough, yeah.
oh, okay, fine, I have a replacement. Let me go and take these things. So that's just, again,
It's comfortable food, but it's not exactly healthy. It's comfortable for the mother.
it's convenience.
Yes.
It's not comfortable for the baby. It's just
Yes.
comfortable or
the
convenience for the parent, right? So, thank you so much, Dr. Atra. We had a very, very nice and informative session because pediatric gastroenterology is a very evolving subspecialty where so much newer research is happening and so much is not understood yet. Right?
Yes.
And
it's like a Pandora's box.
Absolutely.
It's still like it.
Still so much evolving. And you are a young researcher and investigator. We wish you really from Feminine Systems for a woman like you to grow big in your field because you were one of those 50 top pediatric gastroenterologists of the world. So it's a pride for us as well. And in a specialty which is very, very close to my heart because I think food determines who we are, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote in my book, this line, it's not what you eat, you become, it's what your grandmother ate. So it's not just ending up with us, right?
Yeah.
So what we eat and things,
We're going to
two
influence
generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and actually we've already killed so many strains of microbiomes which are lost. They say 30 to 35% of the microbiomes which are present in those hunter-gatherers or those native tribal population is not present in an urban population. We've already
So we've
lost.
already lost it.
We're
There's no
always-
way to retrieve them.
200 years before what was there, we've lost it.
Yeah.
So unless it is really fed from any reservoir or something, we can't really we are not able to retrieve it because we don't have source. So if we keep losing and more, the quality of microbiomes keep going down, more and more chronic ailments increase.
Will increase
The health
because
burden
our body
increases.
is not supposed to be sterile.
Right.
It's supposed to have the microbes. So let's accept it and accept that symbiotic relationship and embrace it.
Absolutely. That's why the Indian culture always revered a cow, right? Because it has a very symbiotic relationship with this microbiome basically, because it has much more bacterial cells than what humans have. So maybe that is why there was this wisdom of reverence to why I always wondered why not a dog. Why? Because that's more loyal also, right? So why not a dog? Why is a cow so sacred? And I found out the answer. So definitely it is
And that's
because
why
of
even the cow dung like what we call
Yeah.
today as a fecal microbiota transplant. Maybe the cow dung did it long
It
back.
is inoculum basically. It
Yeah.
is an inoculum into your farms. It is inoculum into your house. They clean it, clean your houses every Pongal or functions. They just, and it is like a monthly ritual. They have to clean it. They feel it is actually helping the health of. They saw that in the practice, and probably that is why they did it. And
It's just that we are ignorant. We need to
We
look
need
at
to
it from a scientific
more
lens.
holistic. It is. It
Yeah.
see
I
the
mean,
what is this normal commensals? What is not? It's not. See, I will tell you. It just you put idli batter in a state in US. The time taken for it to ferment, from grinding it to fermentation is so long. It takes sometimes people go put it in their garage.
So that
Because
it gets
there is some bacteria there, or there is some dirt there is some heat there, so they just see that place little dirty in their house. They put it there for it to get fermented. Here you just leave it for some 8 hours outside it is. So this is something that coexisting is something with what was around. Now in the concrete jungle we are actually losing many
Good practices, yeah.
so we are somewhere getting lost. Maybe we should revive all that. And thank you for this enlightening talk with you, and it's such a pleasure to have you on Feminine Systems.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank
And
you.
It was very enjoyable for me too.
Thank you,
so
Aarti.
much.